Good afternoon, everyone. Mike Potter here, the head of schools of the Tyndale Group. There's a very important letter that's coming out this afternoon, which is the school's response to the coronavirus, COVID-19, and also the directions that have been put into place by the Australian Government, the South Australian Government, the Centre for Disease Control Branch and SA Health. We have been in direct contact with all of those organisations, as well as the Association of Independent Schools of South Australia and Christian Schools Australia, and we've been working collaboratively with them to ensure that as a school we comply with all directives, that we put things into place to make sure that we keep our community as safe and healthy as possible. I want to strongly encourage you to take time to read through that letter. It's quite lengthy, but it deals with not only the restrictions that have been put into place by governments, it looks at the things that we have already done to mitigate any impact of the COVID-19 virus, and it also talks about potential things that we may need to do in the future if further restrictions are placed on schools. However, before I go into all of those things, what I do want to do is just encourage everyone not to panic. While these are strange days, difficult days, and days of uncertainty, I do want to encourage you that together we can work this through. And as a Christian school, we are committing this also to our Heavenly Father and praying for His wisdom, guidance and peace at this time. In regards to the letter, there are a number of things, specific things that we need to talk about. The first is that it is absolutely vital that every member of our community complies with the directions and the restrictions placed upon us by the Australian Government. The first obvious one is that anybody travelling from overseas now must isolate for 14 days, irrespective of whether you're feeling sick or not. We would strongly advise that all Australian citizens, and including our communities, abide by those restrictions. Please do not come to school if you've been travelling overseas and have come back to Australia post last night at midnight. However, if you travelled before that time and you've just come back, can we strongly encourage you to monitor your health? If you are in any way feeling under the weather, please self-isolate, look after yourself, but also make sure that you're looking after the community as well. It's really important that we abide by this so that we can mitigate any effect of the virus on our community. The second thing is that anybody who is tested positive for the virus clearly will not be allowed back to the school until they've been medically cleared to do so. And so it's really important that everybody follows that advice, because the last thing we want is for someone who has contracted the virus to come back prematurely and therefore impact on the rest of the community. The second thing that we want to encourage you to do is to make sure that everybody follows good hygiene practices. And in our letter there are things that are listed down that can help everybody do that. Please sit with your children and talk to them about this. One of the things that we have done, apart from the fact that we'll have all teachers talking regularly about good hygiene practices, is that we have instituted a non-touch practice. Now, it's not a policy as such, but it is good practice, and we would like to encourage everybody within our communities to avoid physical contact where possible. The obvious exception to this will be where someone requires medical intervention, whether that being a band-aid on a cut or more serious medical help. Clearly our healthcare centre takes a lot of precautions anyway around protecting themselves and protecting others in these events, and we will encourage them to continue their normal practice to look after everybody who comes to them. But outside of that, we've already instituted it today, and it feels a bit strange, but we're all avoiding physical contact. That's a really important one. The other one is if you do have a slight cough or a cold, while we'd probably encourage you to stay home until you feel better, and if you don't, go and get medical help, medical advice, but if you have a slight sniffle, then don't feel bad if everybody keeps at least 1.5 meters away from you, but we're all trying to take our best precautions to mitigate or minimise any impact of a potential spread of the virus. Clearly there's some things that we've had to do already as a community, and as you would be aware, last week we advised you that we'd cancelled our Kenya trip. Given the new restrictions that have been placed on all Australian citizens in regards to travel, that is, that all travellers coming back from overseas must isolate for 14 days, this would have meant that the Kenya trip couldn't have gone ahead anyway. Kenya also has actually closed its borders to all travellers other than their own citizens, so that also would have prevented the trip from going ahead. So we're, in one sense, pleased that we were able to make that call, irrespective of those directions, but knowing that those directions have certainly supported the decision that we made. However, I do need to let you know that we've also cancelled our Kokoda trip, which was going ahead in July as well. All of those involved in that have been notified, and while we know they're very disappointed, the reality is that we're not going to send children overseas if they then have to come back again and be isolated for 14 days. We have made no decision yet about our Sri Lanka trip. The Sri Lanka trip goes ahead in October, and we will just continue to monitor. We are working with government agencies, we are looking at Smart Traveller and the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, and we will keep monitoring that situation. However, if the trip was supposed to go ahead now, we wouldn't be going. One, because Sri Lanka has been listed as reconsider your need to travel, which is outside of our policy, and also because, again, students would have to be self-isolated for 14 days afterwards. And so therefore there would be no way in which we'd be able to continue. Therefore, unless things change by October or prior to October, it's very likely that the Sri Lanka trip won't go ahead. But we will continue to monitor that. In regards to our domestic trips, we do have a number of those as well. I do need to let you know that this morning we've been in contact again with the school community up at Normanton, where our Tyndale Salisbury East children head up to every year in April, and they have advised us that they do not wish us to come. Indigenous and Torres Strait Islanders are particularly susceptible to the virus, and we do not want to in any way compromise their health, but also the idea of having children up in far north Queensland have somebody contract the virus and then be in a remote area, we don't believe is best practice in terms of looking after our children. So for Salisbury's families, and specifically Year 9s, that trip has also been cancelled. We are looking at a number of other trips as part of our school calendar at all 3 schools, and outside of that we are monitoring. There is another trip to Normanton in November this year. We've made no determination about that. There is a Year 9 Canberra trip from Salisbury East at the end of the year, as well as a trip, a middle school trip at Strathalbyn, and so in term 4, and we've not made any decisions about those, but we will keep you updated about them as we get more information as we move forward. I know this is a lot of information, and I'm just trying to work my way through it as best as possible. Now we come to adjusted programs. So what are we actually going to do at school? Well, there are a number of things that we've put into place already, and if you don't mind, I'm actually going to go to my sheet so that I remember them all. The first is that if there are any parent-caregiver interviews with teachers, they will continue, but we will adjust the way we do them. That is, there won't be any mass gatherings like we do at information evenings, or if we do at meet the teacher evenings. These will be purely areas where you as a family, mother, father, carers are able to come, sit with the teacher concerned, meet with them, have your interview, and then basically move on. What we won't be doing is having large groups getting together. The second is that even though we do have a bit of a time limit, sometimes either we or families tend to go over that a little bit, we're going to strictly keep those to 10 to 15 minutes, and that will be determined by each sub-school or each school campus about what they will look like. But it's going to be really important that everybody sticks to those times so that we limit the personal contact with each person. If you as a family have listed yourself down or would normally come to a parent-teacher interview, and the parent-teacher interviews come up and you decide that you do not wish to attend those interviews, then what's going to happen is if you already have a slot, or if you wish to have a slot but not come, we will actually keep those slots free and the staff member will actually contact you by mobile and have a conversation with you about your students. So you can still actually have the interview, but it'll be done remotely rather than face-to-face. The next thing is what we do want to encourage you is that when you are having your interviews, don't start talking about COVID-19. The staff are there to talk about your children, their progress and how they're doing, and the way in which you and the school and the staff can work together for the benefit of your child. Conversations about COVID-19 aren't really going to be helpful. If you do have questions, and you are more than welcome to ask questions about COVID-19 and anything that the school is doing, then I really encourage you to find a senior school staff member, organise a time to meet with them, organise an interview, organise a time when you can ring us. We would be more than happy to have those conversations. The best people to speak to, first of all though, and please understand this, will be the principals of your campus or the sub-school principals at Salisbury East. They are the best people to contact if you have any conversations about coronavirus and how we as a school are responding to it. The second thing is about representative sporting events and sports days. We are aware that SACSA, the South Australian Christian Schools Association, which oversees sport here, are already cancelling a number of events. It's our expectation that little, if any, of these will proceed at this point in time. Therefore, you can expect that there will be a number of sporting events cancelled over the next few months. The table tennis event, which was coming up, has already been cancelled, and we will be monitoring that as a school, but we're fairly certain that SACSA will take that decision making themselves, and that numbers of sporting events will be cancelled. Secondly, in regards to sports days, family fun days, and those sorts of events, I do need to let you know that they will be postponed. We're not going to have those large gatherings at the school, and we think that it's best that we take a conservative approach around those. Therefore, please contact your local school or local sub-school in regards to information about when they may be rescheduled. It is hoped that we may well be able to hold them later in the year, but that's going to very much to be dependent on what happens next with the virus. The next one is camps. All camps have been cancelled until further notice. We know that this is going to disappoint a lot of people, just as it has cancelling the Kenya trip, the Kokoda trip, and the Normanton trip in April. We understand that children will be absolutely disappointed about that, but we believe that those events, camps, are actually normally events where flus and colds and everything else gets circulated, and we believe that it's prudent that we make that decision. Whether they can be rescheduled at another time of the year, we are not sure, and your sub-school or school campus will be able to answer those questions, probably not at this stage, but further down the track. Also need to let you know that any productions that the schools might be running will also be postponed. So specifically for Salisbury East at this moment, that means that the Fifth Business Into the Woods production has been postponed. Once again, we know that this will disappoint those involved and all those who would want to go and see it, but that is the decision that we've made based on best practice and looking after everybody. Finally, the other one that we've made is that clearly chapels and assemblies will have to be adjusted, especially at Salisbury East, where we have in excess of 500 people attending. We haven't quite worked out what that's going to look like yet. We're having those discussions this week, but please be advised that it is probable that at Murray Bridge and Strathalbyn, your chapel services will be able to continue as is, but we will look at those, especially because at Strathalbyn they're primary 1 week and secondary the next, so that actually reduces the numbers. But we'll be looking at the length of time, making sure that we're not keeping people there for prolonged periods of time. But at Salisbury East, clearly we can't have junior and middle school assemblies and probably senior school assemblies going the same way they have. It is likely that the Australian government will bring about further restrictions about the number of people that can be involved in an event. We will then adjust those things accordingly. And so please stay tuned to that, and we'll give you more information as it comes to hand. So the big question is, what happens if schools close? Schools are going to close for one of two reasons. One, the Australian government may decide that, as some other countries already have, that to prevent the spread of the virus, they're going to close all schools indefinitely. That has not been the decision that the Australian government has taken at this stage, and we certainly support their decision on that, especially as they are recognising that by closing schools, that is going to place many families in a very difficult situation. One, it means that parents may not be able to go to work, which is going to impact on income and their ability to be able to support their families. But secondly, it means that healthcare professionals are going to be torn between looking after their own children and being available to look after those impacted by this virus. And so we support that decision, but we recognise that things may change. So if the government does decide to close all schools, then obviously Tyndale will follow that. We will close down, and then we will look at how we can support families in the interim. The difficult about a blanket closure of all schools is that we have no idea when they will reopen. And that is going to be something that's going to be out of our hands. However, we will do our very best to support families and student learning during that time, and I'll talk about that in a minute. The other way in which our school, or one of our 3 schools, would close is if there is a confirmed case of COVID-19 at either one of our students or one of our staff members are confirmed with that virus. If that happens, all of our directions will be taken from the Department of Health and the Centre for Disease Control branch. They will make a decision about how we close, when we close, who closes, and how long we close, and what needs to happen in the interim. Tyndale will not be making any unilateral decisions. We will abide by the health authorities and what their directions are. If that happens, we will be in contact with you immediately, and we will then advise you of what they've advised us. And that will give you the ability to be able to make decisions about your own children on that basis. However, irrespective of whether we have to close down for a couple of days while they do a deep cleanse, or whether we have to close down for 14 days, or whether we are closed down indefinitely, we have been having a number of meetings to look at how do we support student learning moving forward. I want to encourage you that we are very well placed to be able to do this. We have a number of online platforms which we will use to be able to continue learning. We want to especially reassure Year 11 and Year 12 students that we will do everything possible to ensure that your learning is disrupted as little as possible. There is no way that we can guarantee exactly the same quality of education from an online basis, because you won't have that one-on-one contact with staff. But we will do as much as we can to look after you during this critical time. For all other students, we have a number of ways in which we can ensure that learning will go on, and that we are going to be putting those into place. I'm not going to say much more about that other than to say that it'll be your sub-school or your school campus that will be able to best advise you on exactly what they're going to put into place should a school closure occur. Obviously, what we put into place will be dependent on whether we're closed for 2 days or whether we're closed for 2 months. So please make sure that you are looking out for any advice in that regard. Only a couple of things to go. I just want to say that we recognise that the coronavirus is already affecting families. We know that some families are already doing it tough, especially because it may well be that the virus is impacting on your business, on your family home, and we want to let you know that we recognise that, and we don't want you to go silent on us. If you're finding it tough financially because of the virus, please contact us. Please come and speak to us, and we will have conversations with you about how we can best support you and your family through this time. We are a community. We are committed to being Tyndalians together, and we want to make sure that you are looked after as much as possible. We will do everything in our power to ensure that the family circumstances that you're experiencing, especially if it's financial, do not impact on your ability to be able to continue sending your children to the school. Finally, I want to finish off with a word of encouragement. And I started with this, but in all of this, as a Christian school, as a Christian group of schools, we absolutely believe that we can rest in the shadow of God's wing. I want to encourage you that Jesus spoke often about not being anxious, but committing these things to Him. I want to encourage you to do that. If you're a person of faith, I want to encourage you to commit your way to Jesus and know that He absolutely walks with us every single day. If you're not a person of faith, or if you follow another faith, I want to encourage you that God is there, that He's watching over us, that He loves us, and He cares for you. And that as a community, we care for each other because He cares for us. We know that as we commit these things to Him, we can trust Him for our future. I want to thank you for taking the time to watch this. I hope it hasn't gone on too long. It's been quite a bit to discuss. Please read the letter. There will be a frequently asked questions section as well that will be coming out, which may answer some of the questions that I haven't been able to answer on this video. But I want to thank you for listening. I commit you to Jesus, and pray and know that we will get through this together, as Tyndalians always do. God bless. Thanks very much.